What up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Gen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Schultz. DC Roundup. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, we ain't gonna stop talking about it. We can't, because it's in the news. And this news affects what the most recent future and how quickly it could change. Because of this situation. I talked about it years ago before I even had this little space I have now. It was under construction, baby. And look at where we are now. We're not specifically talking about the sale of DC. We're talking about the sale of an entire organization that has been around for decades. Brian, would you say, before I list the other things that we're going to be talking about, would you say that the big dogs didn't come in and needed a little bit more time, possibly, because we didn't get any offers from Amazon, you know what I'm saying? So, or Apple, I think, right? Do you think it's to give them time to come in with an offer? So Paramount greenlights Rush Hour 4 because somebody said, I want a Rush Hour 4. No script, no idea what this is. It's just happened. We've said on this show on numerous occasions about what sort of leader is required to run DCU Studios. It sounds like too much to handle, in my opinion. And finally, listen, I'm gonna continue to pitch Adam Ritchson forever. And who the Batman that I think we needed. But we got somebody, that he perhaps read for a part, Brian, and they say, yo, this guy right here. I haven't seen anything, Brian. I don't know if you have, but we'll talk about that Batman rumor as the lead for James Gunn's DCU Batman. WB, Brian, where are we with this?
Well, again, these are all deadlines being set by the selling company. So just keep that in mind. These are not like legal deadlines, but Warner Brothers had set a deadline of November 20th for offers to be submitted. We know there were at least three submitted, one from Paramount, which has been there all along, one from Netflix, one from Comcast. There's sort of the unconfirmed reports of like, was the Middle East involved as a fourth bidder? Haven't heard any update on that. There was talk that Amazon was looking at this, but no formal bid appeared, and Apple has never been attached to a number as well. So we get a statement from Warner Brothers after the bids come in that the bids aren't good enough. So they gave people until we're recording this the day before the new deadline to basically say, we want new offers and they better be higher than the old offers, which is like, I mean, doesn't everyone? I mean, I don't know. So, but the only update I have to that, which kind of maybe thickens the plot a little bit, is there is a report that Comcast is now going to be the high bid, that they have moved to $28 a share. Remember, Zaslav's hoping for at least 30, but this is as we've talked about, this is the owner of the NBC networks. They're only at $28 a share would imply they are bidding for the entire thing, which I didn't know, because originally I think they were just bidding for the studio and the streamer because they were doing a spin out of their own linear TV channels. So I don't know if that's changed or not, but it sounds like on the sweetened bid, maybe they're willing to try and take the whole thing. But again, I think regulatory and political wise, this is probably the most difficult of the deals out there. They did signal on their earnings call they thought it wasn't as hard as everyone thought, but how do they know? I mean, at the end of the day, they own the networks that have been sort of the most thorn in the side of the administration for the last decade, or both terms they've been in office. So I do think there's some difficulty there. So I think the challenge for WB becomes, if your best offer is from the place that might have the toughest time getting the deal closed, what do you do with that? But that's kind of where we're at in terms of timing and deals, but still Apple and Amazon know word that they want to get involved formally. And we'll have to see if at the 11th hour they decide to come in and basically say, look, it's take it or leave it. We don't want to be in a competitive situation. You want to work with us, we'll work with it. We'll work with you on it. But so far, it seems like they're at least either willing to let this pass or believing that given the agendas at work, they will not be allowed to win, which is also a possibility.
So Paramount would be the loser if Comcast wins. I just want to make sure that these are separate entities. Paramount and this is Comcast, correct?
Paramount,
Or
Comcast,
Sky.
Netflix. Yeah, so Paramount and Skydance are the same company. Skydance technically bought Paramount, but kept the Paramount name. So, yeah.
Okay.
This is Comcast on its own, no partners.
I mean, have they made any statements regarding DCU or DC or James Gunn or anything like that?
No, but I think the Rush Hour thing is actually the most telling thing in that piece of it, which is by all accounts, one of the reasons Paramount is favored is because they just took over with the Skydance merger. They just took over CBS, the CBS networks, right? A left-leaning channel, and installed a more right of center head. And that person is going through Barry Weiss, and that person is going through and kind of changing out some of the personalities, right? That's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. So now you're going to have in theory, if it's Comcast, the owner of MSNBC, CNBC, right? And obviously, when you get a hold of Warner Brothers, you're getting CNN. That's the big left-leaning news outlet you're getting there. So Washington, do you really think they're going to approve a combination of NBC and CNN and say, you guys are good to go talking about us the way you've talked about us the last 2 terms? Yeah, good luck convincing people of that, right? So point is, for Comcast and Brian Roberts to get in position to win this, they have to be prepared, likely, to make major concessions in terms of their agenda for the combined. And this is where I keep going back to DC of do you believe that if Washington cares so much about this, that they're just going to go down the line and skip over DC in that process? When we're talking about the characters we're talking about, right? We're talking about huge global productions around Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Justice League. Are they just going to sit by and say well, we only care about what they say on TV. We don't care about what is portrayed in that type of content? I find that hard to believe. I think that the same strokes that are applied in the one area are going to be applied to the other. And Paramount, because of the Ellison family connection, so far is showing they are willing to play some ball. And I would say, even though we haven't gotten word of a raised bid, I think the Rush Hour story is a something. To me, that was a clear signal of how this will work if they were to win, which is a way of signaling hey, let's get this, we can get this deal done and we can get it done quickly. Look what we're willing to do.
But let's go into that, man, because the story there is, Zaslav's not happy with the numbers. And he wants them to try harder.
I mean, if this works, I feel like every seller should just refuse and be I'm not happy with the bid. I want higher bids. And then the higher bids just come in. I don't know why that.
Do you think Zaslav settles around 29 point something? You think that's... you think 30 is his highest, or you think he's going for 29 point something?
30 is a posture, right? 30 is a negotiation posture tactic. That's basically saying that's my minimum pay or play number. But yeah, at the end of the day, Warner Brothers and its board have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders as a public company to do the best thing possible, right? And if the best thing possible is $29 a share for the entire entity versus going it alone and splitting it up, that they'll take the 29. That's most likely. That's just usually how this works. But I think he is trying to buy time for other parties. And I think he's probably frustrated that there's interference, because the interference might be getting in the way of a more pure bidding process for this, right? This is clearly a directed process, and a directed process might limit the upside to Warner Brothers shareholders. Like, I'm interested to see what happens. Whoever wins this, do you get lost? Like, what kind of losses do you get on the backside from people saying like value was not maximized because this was a rigged game?
I'm just thinking about whoever wants to buy WB doesn't want to deal with none of that stuff.
Well, the Ellisons clearly are willing to. This is my point. This is why I'd say, like, why are we talking about Rush Hour on this show? It's like the sitting, I mean, like, look, this is all public domain fact. The sitting president tweeted out he would like to see the Rush Hour franchise revived. That was a Paramount franchise.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a Rush Hour movie, and I can't remember when Rush Hour 3 was.
They weren't even thinking about it.
Right? And Brett Ratner has basically been out of Hollywood. The director of all three of those movies been out of Hollywood as like a Me Too poster child for almost a decade, right? But literally within 48 hours of Trump requesting this, what came across? Confirmed, Paramount will distribute a fourth Rush Hour film. Now, they have licensed this IP to where they would not be the sole financier of the movie. However, reports are they would actually get the first dollar gross back. So they would get paid before whoever else makes this movie. And as part of Rush Hour 4, not only Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan, Brett Ratner will direct it. So I'm just saying, again, people, actions. Just circle that sequence. Are you telling me it's so far-fetched to believe that that same type of action-reaction could occur with a DC property? Like, if you think it's impossible, tell me why it's impossible. Because they literally just resurrected a franchise from the dead, out of nowhere, to appease one interest. If that same interest says, I want to see a true Christopher Reeve style, Gene Hackman style remake of Superman, are they going to then be like, nah, we're not doing that? Like,
I'm thinking about the end result here and the perspective of the actors who had no idea this was happening, and I'm being hired, not so different from perhaps how they were hired before or casted, if anything, right? They had when this first was start up, they had these guys in mind, and there was a conversation. Would you like this time is we want to see this happen, and you have no say in it. So forget about what you were doing or whatever plans you have. You're being forced to do something. You're being forced almost to do something you may not were thinking about, right? And the end result, is it worse than Rush Hour 3? Do we see them really not being there for this and it not bringing back? I don't know.
I mean,
like, if this is horrible, this is not good. But
Rush Hour 3 wasn't good. I mean, that was, okay, I looked it up. 2007. This hasn't been a consideration for almost 2 decades. Jackie Chan is 71. Chris Tucker hasn't headlined a movie since Rush Hour 3. So if you would like to read between the lines as to why an Apple or an Amazon might be hesitant to get involved, I think it's this.
They don't want to have to deal with this.
Because why do you want that kind of interference about like Amazon just took over the Bond franchise? Do you think they want another voice over the shoulder saying, I really think the Bond should be like the Roger Moore Bond? Like, they may not want to get involved with that.
Listen, yeah. And if the administration wants to profit from the movie industry, this would be the way to go about it.
I mean, if they want to create a set of entertainment networks, which basically is solely being constructed and played for their own entertainment, well, then that seems to be what they're after here. But That's not necessarily good. When DC's caught in the middle of that, that's not going to be a great outcome for DC fans. Like even if the people in question had impeccable taste, that model just look how many times have we complained about models in IP where it's solely about what one person wants to do versus what is a good feel for the broader audience, right? We've talked about this with all sorts of creators who have had too much control, and they were in the business, let alone someone basically sitting at home, albeit a very high profile home, saying, this is what I want to see.
Imagine this movie being made or any other movies being made if this were to happen, where you have somebody who perhaps is not a filmmaker or anything like that, having a say over but being on set and giving, I'd be like, what was that guy that I think David Fincher, he was getting upset at someone about the time of a scene.
No, you'd be like Michael Douglas in Falling Down. That's what you'd be like. You just like go absolutely nuts, start carrying an automatic. That's what you do. But my point is like this guy. Look, I don't even want to get it. Like, look, he's a fan of the '80s. I'm a fan of the '80s as well. It doesn't mean I want to see every single thing in TV and film recycling the 1980s. Like, but he's made a comment about like not just Rush Hour 3, but he's like, it'd be great if they brought back all these like buddy cop things from the 80s. It's like, well, okay. So is he going to resurrect Lethal Weapon too? Like, is he going to resurrect, 48 Hours? Like, I mean,
that is why He-Man is going to make $1 billion because it's pure.
Well, so then I started thinking about like, okay, so that means if we had fun with this exercise. So then, like I said, that's why I brought up that obviously we can't have another Christopher Reeve Superman. Actually, kind of sadly, but like a Christopher Reeve, a Gene Hackman style Superman 3, Superman 4. Like, no thanks. I mean, Tim Burton Batman. Like, is that what we want again? That was great in 1989. I don't know if we need that. You know what I mean? But what was it? Was it the old Captain America movie? That was like 1990, right? Wasn't that when that one came out? Like that original one? I think it was like around 1990.
Was it the 90s? Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, the John Wesley
like
Shipp Flash TV show that was around in like the late 80s. Like, that's my point.
Ritchson is Flash Gordon. Alan Ritchson is Flash Gordon.
That's another movie from with Queen and doing the music and all that from back when. See, like we don't need that. We don't need that. And the point is like this is a really like slippery slope for this type of stuff. But I just keep bringing it up because I just feel like DC is so high profile. And put Harry Potter in this mix, right? You just put every like super duper high profile set of characters into the mix and you say, once you start having that kind of big brother interference on what we see and how we see it, you just have to assume it's coming everywhere, right?
The opposition will grow where your bottom line will suffer because of it.
That's my point. Any one person's sensibilities, no matter how good they are, inherently limits the appeal because it's like, you're just doing it because it's what you want to do and you want to see.
Yeah.
And the beauty of great filmmakers is they are able to marry their vision with a sensibility for what everyone wants to see.
Yes.
I watched, we're on an aside here. I watched James Cameron's documentary about Avatar. And he actually weighed in on the Warner Brothers thing on a podcast. I want to get to that. He said something really interesting about the Netflix bid, which I think people ought to pay attention to. But I was watching what he was sharing about how he developed this movie and the world. And there's something that I felt was very Cameron in the middle of it because he was struggling with how to capture Way of Water. They had this big tank. And they were having these like professional divers try to train the actors on how to move like the Na'vi. And they were struggling. And so he was like, and this guy's Mr. Underwater, obviously. So he got the studio to pay for the entire like cast and crew to go to Hawaii and basically like swim at night, swim at day, like snorkel and scuba dive off this reef. And he's giving a speech to the cast and crew where he's basically like, you are solely here to basically like develop your connection to the underwater world, to nature. And like, you're listening to this and you're like, he's not talking about this from the standpoint of what he wants to see. He's talking about it from the standpoint of what he knows we need to see to believe in this world. And it's like, you just see like he's going through this entire painstaking exercise to get everyone involved to be like, no, you have to move and feel and act underwater in a way that millions of people around the world will believe you actually have done that your entire life. And I was like, is he an egomaniacal, like crazy director? Yes, but he's also thinking globally.
That's why He-Man is going to make $1 billion.
I mean, that is 80s IP, but
and then we'll move on after this, man.
Yeah.
Just think about all those times that you've been in the theater and everyone laughed. Everybody got the joke. That came from someone who believed that this joke would hit with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you go about. That's how I think about things when I'm creating stuff. You know what I'm saying? It makes me feel this way. It's no different than when you go to a theater and you saw Titanic and how people were just mesmerized with what they saw. Because he knew how you guys would take it in and consume it and be moved by it. That's directing, yo. Directing an audience emotions.
He weighed in on Warner Brothers, though. And I want to put this in there because he said something which I had not thought of, but, you know, James Cameron speaks, I will listen. So after everything we just said about Paramount, he said, I think Paramount's still the best choice. Netflix would be a disaster. Sorry, Ted Sarandos, but geez, he's gone on the record saying theatrical films are dead. Theatrical is dead, quote unquote. He was then countered with, yeah, but Netflix already indicated they will put Warner Brothers movies in theaters, which we talked about. He went the other way. Here's Cameron. Sucker bait. That means we'll put the movie out for a week, 10 days, qualify for Oscar consideration. That's fundamentally rotten to the core. He then went on to say, basically, Netflix would honor the existing contract, meaning they would distribute in the theater any movie that already came with the deal. And once those deals were done, he said everything will be brought into Netflix and for streaming. He said that's a complete bait and switch.
I believe that we are at the tipping point where Netflix has the opportunity to change the game, as I've said before. I get watching a movie with a crowd, having the big screen and stuff like that. That hasn't evolved. You know, it's the movie experience. It's evolved with reclining chairs and being served food. Then you have these other things, the sphere and these 4D, these things where you move and stuff like that. You have those experiences which are very far and few in between. I still don't think that may be everything that we can experience, Brian, but I certainly do think that Netflix has the opportunity to continue put a Netflix experience theaters. And you get this super discount because you're what? A member, a subscriber.
More money, more money, more money.
And other things that enhances that experience. The theater experience hasn't evolved. Netflix has the opportunity to change how we go to the movies. And it doesn't have to be too different from the old experience. We still go to see a big screen and stuff like that, but everything surrounding that experience has to change. What do you think?
Hold that thought, because in our void, we'll talk a little bit about an update on Stranger Things. And I think there's some early indications of validation of Netflix bringing that to the theater. And I think that's going to be a really interesting test case of something that they will do more of in the future. But my point, it's interesting because Cameron, as a longtime Hollywood insider, is giving the other side of that coin, right? He's basically saying, don't trust these guys. This is a Trojan horse, right? And we're saying Netflix might be evolving around past their legacy views, right? He's going the other way. I think that's a healthy debate. I just thought it was interesting that he was so brazen in basically saying like, and to be clear, why he's defending Paramount as the best choice is simply that they are committed to theatrical themselves, right? He has no questions as to whether they would put movies on the big screen and continue to do that. And I think if my memory serves, I believe Paramount distributed Titanic back in the day for him. So I thought that was an interesting comment. By the way, before we leave Cameron, and I know we're a little filled of DC, he was also, I texted you this. I was like, I'm getting my hand like ready because he was asked about the sphere. And he was like, I'm studying the technology closely. He's like, I would like to develop a project using that as a found. I said that when we talked about this Sphere Wizard of Oz thing. I said, watch if Cameron gets involved. He's tailor-made to do something with this. And now he's saying he's looking at it. So anyway, just keep your eyes on that. But let's get back to DC. Let's get back to James Gunn, because he gave us a little, some tidbits about what he's doing day to day. So,
yes.
Yeah, someone asked him literally like,
we're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah. To his credit, here's the quote, and then we'll break it down. And I actually had a little angle on this I wanted to ask you about. Quote, okay. The majority of my days are currently spent prepping Man of Tomorrow. Makes sense. Storyboarding, department meetings, scouting, casting, interspersed with going over cuts of Supergirl and Lanterns, discussing marketing on all the projects, reading and making notes on new scripts, supporting the Batman Part 2 crew to make sure that goes smoothly. Interesting. Waiting for the first cut of Clayface. Can't wait. Okaying designs for all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure many things that I'm forgetting. End quote. He's probably not underselling or overselling that much. That probably is a decent representation of what he is doing. But you bring up the obvious point, which is none of these things sounds like a 5-minute exercise. I mean, making a movie, a blockbuster movie itself is full time. I mean, ask any of these top directors what they put into it. None of them is doing this on top of it.
Speed is not a friend in this case, because it translates to your end result. And for me, it often shows in his work. Speed. Because there's not a lot of thought in given to the conversations that I had in some of these movies and some of these shows. I'm sorry.
Couple things we're learning here. I don't think these are shocking, but let's just go through them. Going over cuts of Supergirl and Lanterns. So we know that I believe Supergirl was rough cut was screened already. So that implies it's in a finished form. Lanterns, despite being delayed, kind of sounds like it might be rough cut done. That's sort of what he's saying. Maybe like the rough cut material. They haven't cut it down into the final episode breakdowns, but that's sort of implying that they didn't delay it because they weren't finished. They delayed it because they weren't kind of satisfied or had everything lined up in a row. Sounds like Clayface is moving pretty fast. We know they wrapped filming pretty recently, so it sounds like that first rough cut for that one may be in pretty soon. What did you make of the Batman Part 2 comment?
Repeat it one more time. The Batman comment?
Supporting the Batman Part 2 crew to make sure it goes smoothly.
I'm not going to go crazy and jump out the window and saying that he's somewhat involved. I think he's playing what Kathleen Kennedy was to the guy that wrote and did Andor. What's his name again?
Tony Gilroy.
Whatever you want. I think that's okay. I think that I'm gonna go the safe route and not. What do you think?
Maybe I'm tinfoil hat about this whole thing with him and Reeves, but like this to make sure it goes smoothly. Well, why wouldn't it go smoothly? You weren't involved with the first one at all. That seemed to go just fine with Matt Reeves in control. What are you worried about? What are you trying to say? Now someone will probably tell me I'm reading way too much into this, but like I just was like, couldn't he have just said like, cheering on the Batman Part 2 crew because they're doing an awesome job? To say like to make sure it goes smoothly to me implies that if you were not doing what you're doing, it would not go smoothly. That's kind of what it sort of implies to me, which is a backhanded statement toward Matt Reeves. Again, like he said about the script being just, it's all right.
Yeah. When he said that about the script, listen, if you listen to anybody who isn't James Gunn that talks about the script, They'll tell you everything we've almost talked about what He-Man is going to be. Beautiful. They have nothing but positive things to say about the Batman 2 script.
I just think he could have said supporting the Batman Part 2 crew any way they need me. And that would have been like I'm cheerleading them. They're doing great. For him to put that last little bit into me was like a little bit like, I don't know. I'm in the camp that somewhere down the road, you're going to find out. It's not these guys are mortal enemies, but I think somewhere down the road, there's going to be some kind of expose or somebody's going to speak out of turn years from now and basically be like, these two guys did not see eye to eye. And they were into each other when they were in the same building.
It's quite possible.
I did also want to throw out one other thing. And I thought about this even before he made this quote. This thing about reading and making notes on new scripts. Has anyone else noticed that, like, when it comes to new stuff in the DCU, James Gunn's kind of gone quiet lately? Have you noticed that? How he used to talk about, like, remember how he said, like, there's this other new project that's been greenlit. It's almost done. I can't wait to share it with you, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, now with this, like, merger stuff going on and, like, all the stuff that's developed in the news, you notice how, like, he's only talking about the stuff that's already in the pipeline. I just would point that out because there was a point at which he would respond on threads and socials where he would be like, good news, like, you might be in luck. You're going to hear about this new character. This might be happening that you don't even know about. He's not really saying that anymore. He's only really talking about the stuff we already know about. So when he says new scripts, it's like very general, right? He doesn't, normally I feel like James Gunn in that part would have thrown something in there about like a hint at some character or some project that he was so fired up about that people didn't know. And he kind of just left it. And I just made me think, like, I kind of feel like the new momentum stuff, the new stuff momentum has really kind of slowed and stalled because of what's going on with the company. And they're just not going to move on that type of stuff until they know, like, who's actually running things around here.
Tom Brittney joins the list, Brian. The list. Not the list. The list. Batman. He's being eyed. More specifically, the speculation is because James Gunn made a quote, said something about him, Brian. What's going on there?
A fan on Threads had a post about Tom Brittney and referenced him as Bruce, which prompted speculation about him being considered as Batman in the DCU, to which James Gunn responded, "That guy is a great effing actor." Brittney was, as people might recall, he was one of the auditioning finalists for Superman, the role that went to David Cornsweet. So people are trying to connect the dots to say perhaps that James Gunn is acknowledging Tom Brittney may be on the short list. And then he went on to say, this was actually before, I think this was before, so this is not now. James Gunn had said about Tom Brittney previously, quote, "Truly one of my favorite actors, incredibly talented guy." But when referencing kind of like Batman versus Superman, he said, "I have guys that are at the top of the list for me. But in regards to Superman, none of them were David Cornsweet, so they didn't get the job." And kind of saying the same thing about Batman, right? Like that there's going to be only one. Like there's a list, but then ultimately there'll be one person who reveals himself, and that's going to have to be the person. So
he's 35 years old, 6'2".
Blue eyes, if you care about that. Some iterations have blue eyes, some have dark.
I can see the possibility.
Relatively unknown. I think most people would be like, maybe they would say, that face looks vaguely familiar, but very few people would say he's this guy from this show or movie.
I can see the cape and cowl. You gotta imagine these guys in the cape and cowl when you're looking at it.
I think that's true. But don't you feel like the tiebreaker has really become Bruce? Like what makes you, to me, what makes you a great Batman, a transcendent Batman, is how your Bruce is written and portrayed.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. With the one exception of, with the action is tough because some of that's going to be stunt double. But that's like choreography, right? We had people on our shows saying we want both. We want Ninja Batman and we want, suave Bruce. But I kind of feel like other than Clooney, most of the Batman in costume have looked fine. Has anyone been like, Affleck looked fine in his costume. Like, Keaton, you might not have thought it, but he looked good in his costume. Like Kilmer looked fine in his costume. Obviously Bale in the more realistic costume. To me, it's Bruce. I think that's where you really can make a mark on this character.
My only concern, and I'll say this, I think as the Ben Affleck Batman evolved, he just looked too bulky and not believable that he can move in a way that's graceful in his fighting technique. Certainly he was brutal, because Batman can be brutal. And they showed that excellently, I think, in Batman versus Superman. But even that, you're not going to see that 4 or 5 times in a movie, And so when you show it off, I think in some cases, Batman is going to evolve into different sort of fighters as well as he's fighting. We'll see something different each time because that is a big thing for Batman fans, his fighting ability.
Well, I think that's actually one of the examples of sometimes you run into the challenge as a filmmaker of, is comics accurate your friend or your foe? Because I actually think what Snyder did, just from like a costuming and image perspective with the Affleck costume, the Affleck super suit where he fights Superman, to me, all of that stuff was actually ripped pretty well from the pages.
Yeah.
It's just, as you said, you run into the practicality of when you have a 6'4" actor who's bulked up to whatever weight Affleck was at, and he's wearing a suit that is that textured and that muscled and that big in case of the extra suit in Batman vs. Superman. It limits what you can physically do, practically do, right? So now you're reliant more on the CGI, which gets a little trickier in terms of how good it looks to us. And so that's where it's like, yeah, sometimes comics accurate can be a challenge more than sort of a check mark. I think at this point, it's still early. We still don't even have the context for the project in terms of what they want this Bruce to be. I think I'm still in the camp that Muschietti's going to be pushed out and James Gunn's going to take over this project if he's still in charge. But yeah, as you say, you see the general specs of this guy and you're like, okay, yeah, he sort of checks some of the boxes. I get what people are seeing. Here's my question for you, since we're in the bizarro world of what might happen. What would you do? Because I have read in the craziness of the Snyderverse being restored, I have read that the actor, no surprise, who is least likely to agree to come back is Affleck. He has been very much on the record about how miserable he was during his time as Batman. And his own life has obviously gone to different places since. What would you personally do if Zack comes back, makes Dark Knight Returns, and casts Alan Ritchson as his new, older Bruce Wayne? Would you be okay with that, or would you feel like it messed up what you wanted?
Here's the positive things about it. If we look at 300, if we look at Watchmen, how he approached those movies, I think he will take a similar approach with The Dark Knight Returns as is.
Agreed.
He will bring those comic book panels to life. I think if he were to take that approach, I would be fine with it.
Okay. I happen to agree with you for that particular comic. I think in his mind, if he ever did it, it's a 2-part exercise similar to the way the animated did it. And I think he would basically replicate all the characters, right? Carrie Kelly would be in there. I think the Superman cameo where he's like a henchman of the government. I don't think he would not rehash the fight from BVS because he couldn't do that anymore.
And that's the problem. That's the problem right there.
Right. So that the movie loses some steam because you would have to rework that somehow. Like that's a big challenge. But I do think you're right. For the most part, he would kind of keep the beats the same as he has done with his previous Frank Miller. I just want to throw it out because it's, it'd be ironic if that happened.
Adding Green Arrow, doing it a different way, I think would help. That would be my only concern there. But And one last thing before we sign off. I was thinking about this the other day and how perfect this would be. But like you said earlier, is comic book accurate your friend or foe? Alan Ritchson as Batman and Zoe Saldana as Catwoman, yo. That's an interesting combination. Is it too accurate? But that would be something. But yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you guys think of what the latest headlines have been telling us about what's happening with the WB, this Rush Hour 4 thing, how it can now be involved in every possible movie that we see from. It's just crazy. James Gunn and his schedule. Like I said before, all I wanted him to do is be a studio head and do a good job in greenlighting projects that make sense and storylines and being aware of it, but not doing all this other stuff that you're doing and building this universe. And Tom Brittney. Again, the list, not the list, the list of possible Batman candidates, because the Alan Ritchson thing is just I just don't foresee it happening. Although, man, if you give me the opportunity to cast him in something, I can make it work.
Well, the beauty, as you said, is the way he's aging. He has that rare versatility of he can do Dark Knight Returns, he could do Batman Beyond. Like, you can put his version can be a lot of different things. But some of the other actors on the list, I think it's less certain they can be older Batman.
What's the name of the Steve Austin? What's the name of the original? What's the name of the actor that plays Steve Austin in
Lee Majors?
Lee Majors. He's version 2.0. You know what I'm saying? He's the guy. This is the guy you draw. He's straight out the comic books, yo. And to not have him as Bruce Wayne, although, you know, again, you just got to put him in the Cape and Cowl one day. And if the route is to go back and put him in a one-off or a part 2 possibly, right? But then you have the problem, Brian. Too many Batman happening. Because one will outshine the other for sure. For sure. And then you run into that problem. But let us know in the comment section below what you guys think. Everything we talked about on the DC Roundup. And again, if you haven't heard it anywhere else, you heard it here first on the Nerd Gen Report.